This is Keys to the Shop, episode 351, Professional Tips on Working with Spreadsheets, with Maxwell Mooney of Narrative Coffee. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio, and I'm your host for this podcast, and I'm so excited to present this topic today and also to have you along for the ride. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would love that. It would be really great. That way you stay up to date with all of the content. It also helps the show in its rankings and ratings. It helps more people find this content. And if you found this content useful, spread the love. That's a great way to do it, is subscribing to the show. And also share these episodes with a friend, with your team. All you do is find the icons for sharing wherever you're listening to your podcast and send a link to someone who you think can benefit from these episodes or generally this show. So thanks everybody so much for doing that. Now, if you are looking to improve your coffee shop, or if you're looking to start a coffee shop off on the right foot and work with somebody along the process to help you get your questions answered, gain clarity, and really build a solid foundation, all while avoiding needless mistakes along the way, then working with Keys to the Shop Consulting could be right for you. Keys to the Shop Consulting is where I get to work directly with you to consult and coach you through establishing your coffee shop, improving your coffee shop, and generally striving for higher levels of excellence through operations, people, and quality. And so I would love to have a conversation with you about that. Give me an email, chris@keystotheshop.com. We can set up a free discovery call. We'll chat about what you've got going on and how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you either remotely or in person at your shop. Again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, the word excellence gets used a lot because we are all kind of, hopefully, in specialty coffee, looking for achieving excellence in what we do every day. And one of the ways that we do that is by dialing in our equipment and just purchasing great equipment. And one of those pieces of equipment that I think is just a standard bearer for excellence these days is the ground control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee. This is a revolutionary brewer because the SCA award-winning technology in the brewer, the process that the coffee undergoes, gives you incredible control over a range of flavors that previously you really couldn't access, at least on a regular basis. And it has, anybody who's using this machine, frankly, is astounded at the kind of difference between traditional batch brewers and the ground control and the difference it makes in their coffee. Their customers notice in specialty coffee, we're looking for that edge just a little bit more. And the ground control brewer offers you not just a level up, but a transformation of what your batch brew coffee tastes like. Not only is this an amazing batch brewer, but it also makes tea, batch iced lattes, batch cold brew. There are a lot of ways to innovate with this machine that gives you versatility and improves your efficiency on the bar, all while looking great doing it. So go to groundcontrol.coffee to learn more about this brewer. If you're looking for a level up in quality, serving truly excellent coffee and more to your guests, then I highly recommend you look into getting the Ground Control Cyclops brewer for your store. Again, for more information, go visit them over at groundcontrol.coffee. Now, one of the things that we love about our industry is variety and having options for our customers so that they can have a coffee that's tailor-made for their experience is key. Plant-based beverages are one of the ways that we get to serve our customers who have just different kinds of tastes and dietary restrictions. And I love the fact that we get to use products like the Barista series from Pacific because it is at the top of its game in terms of plant-based beverages worldwide. Their line of plant-based performance beverages are created for baristas and approved by some of the world's best baristas. Every one is formulated and tested for performance on the bar. The Barista series allows you to create amazing texture for latte art. It stands up to the heat from the steaming process, and the flavor in the final drink is absolutely balanced. focused on the coffee shines through in every beverage. And this is key for pleasing your customers, offering them a great specialty coffee experience that's plant-based. So definitely reach out to them over at pacificfoodservice.com and get samples to your store and try them for yourselves. I think you're really going to be impressed. And if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages to serve your customers, I really believe it has to be the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today I'm really excited to offer you a conversation that is very focused on spreadsheets with my friend and yours, frequent guest on the show, Maxwell Mooney of Narrative Coffee Roasters. You know, Maxwell is one of these people that I feel is a natural entrepreneur and leader in what he does with his company at Narrative, starting with a cart and working his way into a brick and mortar. Now he's got a second location, and he was one of our early Founder Friday episodes, and we'll link to those in the show notes for sure so you can hear Maxwell's full story. But he's always had really great insights and articulation of his ideas that, the proof is in the pudding. He has a great company, he has a great staff, a lot of success in coffee. And one of the things that is behind his success is his dedication to making sure that his ideals for running a coffee bar are supported by systems. And you know that we focus on that here on Keys to the Shop. One of the things, the three pillars, if you will, of operations, quality, and people, the operations is firmly rooted in systems. And spreadsheets are one of those things that every coffee shop needs to be using in order to organize the incredible amount of information that you need to keep track of in order to be profitable and run a healthy business, so that all of the stuff you love to see happen in a coffee shop is supported by good, healthy numbers. Especially important to a lot of people is keeping track of costs. With the economy the way it is today, I know a lot of you out there are really hungry for tools to help you keep tabs of what you're spending and how much, therefore, you need to charge. And it goes beyond COGs, or cost of goods, but it also extends, obviously, to labor and other expenses in your shop. Anything that involves recurring numbers in your business, you can get a spreadsheet for that and more. Now, the reason why we're having this conversation with Maxwell is that recently he was featured on a YouTube channel, Upflip, where he went into detail about what's the secret to success behind Narrative Coffee. We'll link to that interview with Upflip in the show notes as well. But Maxwell has been inundated with requests to share his spreadsheets as he offered that on the show. And so I thought I'd bring Maxwell on here today to give you some of his best advice about using spreadsheets, employing spreadsheets in your coffee shop. And of course, he is sharing his spreadsheets very generously with us, and you can find that on the Keys to the Shop website for this episode or in the show notes. So in this conversation, we're going to be focusing on those cost of goods spreadsheets, but generally we're going to be talking about how to use spreadsheets well in your coffee shop. And I think as you listen to what Maxwell has to say, it'll really set you up for success as you move forward to organize your business through spreadsheets as a tool for achieving consistent excellence in your coffee shop. So let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation all about spreadsheets with Maxwell Mooney. Well, Maxwell, always great to have you on the show. I'm really excited to have this really specific conversation with you. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So what precipitated this conversation was that you were featured on this Upflip YouTube channel, and you're going through all that it takes to be a successful coffee shop entrepreneur. And apparently after the episode, you've been inundated with, I think it's now over 200 emails related to spreadsheets. Is that right?
Yeah, it's over 750 now, but yes, yeah, inundated. Yeah.
That just shows you right there how hungry people are for data, or at least the tools to get a grip on what's going on in their shop. We're all kind of people, right? And we love the creative side, and we certainly love coffee. The numbers are a little bit harder to do. So what I wanted to do was sort of get into this a little bit with you and ask the question about spreadsheets in general. And the main question is, what are the main spreadsheets that people should be relying on in their coffee shops? And what are some tips you have on how to arrange them properly? Because there's no shortage of templates and places people can go online, but it can be really confusing. So you've been refining this as your business has grown. You're doing a great job. So let's start from there. What are these core spreadsheets that you're using, and what are some tips for using them properly?
I guess the first question is whether or not a spreadsheet is the right tool for the job. There are spreadsheets are really powerful once you understand how to use like Excel. It's basically like computer coding to create math problems and all sorts of stuff. You can write schedules in them and do all sorts of stuff. But there are better products out there that are available for free. So the big thing in my experience has been trying to find a good product first and then using spreadsheets where a product might not be available or would cost more money than is reasonable. For example, I know at a previous cafe that I worked for, the schedule for the shop used to be written in spreadsheet form, but there are better services now like homebase.com. Joinhomebase.com is what we use, and it has a free service for one cafe. And the feature set on there is just so much better than you could possibly have it in a Excel spreadsheet. So like while you could do that inside of a spreadsheet, it might not be the best tool for it. So in my experience, I usually try to look for a problem that I'm trying to solve, see if there's a service or a thing out there that will solve that problem really well. And if it doesn't, or if it costs money, and I think that it would be easy enough to do it in spreadsheet form, we'll use spreadsheets for that.
That's a good piece of advice. Yeah. So when you look at what you have currently, I assume these were things that you had to build yourself for your business because you need a very specific solution. And so what I have in front of me here is something that, by the way, you're making available to all the people who are listening to this show at Keys to the Shop. They can get this download Excel sheet with all these tabs that you've created for things like ingredient cost, food recipe cost. Cost seems to be the big theme here for a lot of people, I bet.
Yeah, I think just with inflation being the way that it is and gas prices being so high, everybody's costs are adjusting really, really rapidly, which means that particular tool is really helpful. In our state, we've had kind of a rapidly increasing minimum wage over the last number of years. So everybody's costs have kind of been going up consistently. So prices haven't really been stable. So we've really needed to have a good tool to help track our costs. So we do a quarterly price audit that basically tracks all of our COGs, and we go in and update all of our cost of goods in there. And we were running into the problem where it was just really challenging to keep on top of all of our costs because, once flour goes up, so let's say you're using flour, or if for a coffee shop, let's say you're using milk, something that goes into all sorts of drinks and maybe like recipes and those sorts of things. Your cost for that particular item goes up, but then also all of the recipes that you use that product in also become more expensive because the product itself becomes more expensive. And so if you just do that manually once, which I suspect a lot of people do, they'll only do it, once a year at the beginning of the year, or maybe they'll do it once every 2 or 3 years. They'll go through and figure out what all their costs are because it's just so much work to do it the first time. It's then really challenging to keep up with it because it just takes so much time. And so I realized that this was going to become a problem for us. And so I wanted to create a solution that would help us figure it out. And there are some services that do that particular task. You can pay, apps, $100 a month and be able to put in your ingredient costs and then put in your recipes, and then it'll calculate all the costs for you. But I knew that particular task was simple enough to do with a spreadsheet for free, that made it a really good solution. So that's kind of where that spreadsheet was born from. And so basically it just acts as a master kind of cost list that includes all of our raw ingredients. We input all of our recipes, and then it automatically, anytime an ingredient cost goes up, we just put in the cost of that. Like, let's say a bag of flour at 50 pounds goes from $19.75 to $22.75. Now, instead of having to go in and manually calculate the amount of flour in each and every recipe and the cost in each and every recipe, we just input that change. That 1975 is now 2275, and the spreadsheet automatically calculates what all of our costs are now that price of flour has increased. So it's a really great tool for automating things like that are the same. The math never changes. It's always the exact same. So a spreadsheet's a really great tool to use for something like that.
And you're doing this in order to track it to see if there is at some point a decision that needs to be made about prices or sourcing different items from different places, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, kind of we do quarterly updates to our menus as far as our food menus go and our drink menus. So it's kind of that question of like, is it time to raise our prices? Is it not? And having that granularity right now is especially important. We also print all of our menus on paper and those sorts of things. So it makes it a little bit easier than like someone who's using like a hard printed, vinyl menu board or something like that, which is maybe one of the reasons why it's beneficial to have something like that on paper that's easily changeable. But yeah, that's kind of how we use it.
Okay, so then in terms of setting it up in the beginning, you've got to have thresholds that you already understand are healthy for your business. And I mean, how did you go about determining what those were?
Generally speaking, you want to keep the like industry standard wisdom is that you want to keep your COGs or your cost of goods sold at about 30% of your overall revenue. You want to keep your labor at 30%, your hard expenses at 20%, and then rent at 10, and then hopefully the remaining 10% would be profit. That's kind of like the industry standard wisdom around it. So we kind of target that 30%, but you also have to account for waste, which a lot of people don't do. And then there's a couple of other things, like for instance, we're a tax included place, so our menu prices include a 10% sales tax basically. So we have to go through and like math that out and whatnot. So those are all kind of factors that we're looking for. So on our cost sheet, we end up kind of targeting around 20% markup on our things. Some things that are more labor intensive, like for example, we make biscuits in house. Those are not super expensive as far as ingredients go, but they take a lot of time. So we have to kind of account for labor in that. So we use, a more aggressive markup on that as far as COGs go.
Oh, interesting. Even though it's it looks like it's a really high profit margin item, but it's also that invisible labor cost that you're trying to track in a hard spreadsheet.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay, so then when you're talking about this percentage between, there's food and then there's coffee. So is that just across the board, or is that percentage just for your lattes, including your food items as well?
Yeah, we kind of roughly target that kind of 30%.
Okay, so then I want to talk about waste a little bit. Just briefly, like touch on the idea of kind of projecting waste, and it's going to give us a good segue to talk about projection on your spreadsheets. But the idea of saying, well, we're going to waste presumably this amount of milk, coffee, flour, whatever, tapioca balls. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Not for your place, but others. How do you go about setting that up in the beginning? Do you just manually track that and then average it out? Is there an industry standard to attach to each menu item in terms of waste? How does that work?
Well, I think there's an idealistic waste value, which is 0, right? Like nobody wants to waste anything. In an ideal world, everything is perfectly used. But there's also like a component on where you have to understand your business and what in particular your business is doing. I think about, for example, like a place, like a restaurant that's really heavy on like meat, and they get, batches of beef in, and some have more, unsellable fat content than others. And so they have to figure out how to, calculate those sorts of things. So it's helpful to have a generalized idea of what's normal for your industry. And if you don't have a really good idea, you can kind of just pick a number and start with something. Something's better than nothing, 10% or something like that might be a good place to start. And then you have to track it and you have to measure it. And so you want to keep an eye on it because it's really hard to really understand what your waste is if you're not tracking it. So there are some ways to do that for like a coffee bar, for example. If you have like a milk waste is a place where a lot of baristas will end up making some waste because they overportion their pitchers when they go to steam their milk. So if you're really working on trying to make sure that that's dialed in and tight, you can have a pitcher or a bucket that you have all of your baristas empty any excess milk into before they rinse their pitchers. And you can kind of calculate that over a few shifts for each different person and try to get a sense of how much they're wasting. That'll also give you a training point where you can help reduce that amount, but it can also give you a metric to have a better understanding of how much is being wasted each time. So, having like pastries is another example for a lot of coffee shops that they have to deal with waste on, right? So you can track your pastry waste each day. Like you're gonna have moments when a barista drops something, right? So that has to get wasted out. You're gonna have moments where, for whatever reason today, people just did not want to buy your chocolate croissants, and they normally do, but they didn't today, and so now you've lost two of them. And so you have to kind of track those. Once you have enough data, basically, then you can create a more realistic picture of how much you're wasting normally, and like you said, average that out over the course of a period of time. And then once you have a metric by tracking that, you can manage that better, so you can help reduce the waste and improve your waste overall, and you have metrics by which to judge that.
That's great. I imagine there's another part of this where you have the tools to make these good decisions about how to stock certain inventory items based on the waste and how they're sold and how many you're selling and all that stuff. But it's also true that I think without information, we make snap judgments that aren't based on what maybe a long cycle of the chocolate croissant might be. Like,
Yeah.
like the month sales of chocolate croissants will like make up for the day that you don't sell them. And some people will be like, gosh, we didn't sell them today. Maybe we should get rid of them forever. Maybe we should close.
Yeah. Totally. I find that that's a thing that happens to people as they get very short-sighted in their data collection. And you need longer periods of time, larger sample sizes essentially to get really accurate data.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about building into your spreadsheets projections in general. So there's what happens in the real world, and then there's a little bit of like where we want to be mixed in there. So there's this ideal, and then there's the real. How does that work?
Yeah. So depending on how you're using a projection term, right? Like if you're just using a raw dollar amount, like revenue projections, you can. A generalized practice that we like to do is kind of take a look at where we've been, the like growth year over year, month over month growth percentage, and then um, you know basically project out where we're expecting to be for the year. That helps us in terms of managing our labor, helps us understand how much we need to be ordering for that particular month, and those sorts of things. So you can kind of set up a year projection, or if you're starting out trying to open a coffee bar, you need 3 years of projections. So those are helpful to kind of get you started in thinking about, and then you can map them compared to what your actuals are. So for example, like whenever I first opened, we had 3 years of projections built out, and then we would map our actuals compared to our projections, and our revenues were substantially exceeding our projections, although our profits were a little bit under, which is how I knew that we were undercharging for our items, in a lot of ways, because the money just wasn't there quite as much, or maybe there was waste, or any number of factors. So, but it can be helpful to track them comparatively. That can help you budget. It can also help you set better projections. And then you can use those tools. If your projections are ideally, you want to be really good at projecting, because it's going to help you manage better. Because when you project something and let's say you have too low of a projection on revenue, so you're staffed for that lower projection, and then all of a sudden you just take off, and now you're understaffed, right? Because your revenue is just so much higher, and so that's putting more and more stress on your team. you're not going to have enough ingredients on hand to be able to handle that sometimes. So then you're kind of in stress buying situations. Maybe you're not getting as good of a deal, depending on, particularly like if you're a coffee roaster and you've set out your menu for a year. And all of a sudden your projections are really off and you have to order more coffee on spot and then you have to ship it more. So that increases your costs, right? So there's just like, there's a value to being really good and accurate at projecting because it helps you manage your business better. So having more data, longer periods of time, and then adjusting that as kind of things happen is really helpful, and it helps you manage your business better.
I like that you connected that because I could see somebody in a desperate frame of mind putting together a spreadsheet and then seeing that the numbers are lining up and they're just satisfied with that and kind of walk away and don't apply it to how they manage the business as long as the numbers are working. And then if they're working really good, and you just touched on this, where let's say your labor is like stupidly low and people are just like, wow, that's really good. And I think, I I don't know if that's a really good thing. But do you know if it's a good thing? Have you seen how people are responding to these crushing rushes when you've got one person on the till and making coffee too? So you need to use this as a tool, like you're saying, to
Mhm.
combine what's happening in the shop with, hey, this is, I guess, just kind of like an EKG for your business.
Yeah, totally.
So when you are setting these up, is it you that are setting it up and then managing it, or is it a manager, baristas inputting some of this stuff?
It's a mix of both. Largely it's me, kind of setting up the spreadsheets, but there have been a few that other folks have come up with. Our previous assistant manager, Josh, created a really awesome inventory, um, like basically shopping list spreadsheet where, kind of has pars set out for each item that we use in the shops. So like, having a box of napkins and, two boxes of straws. And then he set out pars for each one on a conditional formatting. So that way, if we were under the par for that particular thing, it would then take and populate the next sheet over for how many of that item we needed to purchase
Mm-hmm.
to get up to our par level, our stock level. And so it would basically just create a shopping list for us. Each time we would go through and do an inventory check on it, which is really handy. And honestly, I think it's my favorite spreadsheet that we use because it's just really fun. And he's really good at formatting them and really good at understanding how to set up the spreadsheets themselves,
Yeah.
which is really cool. So I think that's my favorite one. I had nothing to do with that one. But the ingredient cost sheet that I gave away, that was my idea. I set it up and got it all set up, and then our managers do use it. So they're often the ones who are checking and doing all of our our quarterly audits. So our food and coffee managers each go through and update prices, and then we all talk about it in terms of what our menu prices are going to be, because that has so much effect on the business itself. But they're the ones who go in and use it regularly. And then obviously I use it too and hop in there. But yeah, they're all kind of used and by everybody. Anybody's spreadsheet is more than fair game for use. But I end up coming up with a good chunk of them.
Nice. I was going to ask about that, how it really translates to, your staff using them and then knowing how that task is being used by you. Because a lot of our delegated tasks sometimes they get done, but nobody knows why we're doing them. We have no idea how it translates to the way the business is run.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually I stopped this meeting. I was just doing some cash deposits, um, and so I stopped doing those for this meeting. But that's a great example of I have a number of processes that I want our baristas to do, and sometimes they feel like they're a little bit redundant, but they're all for catching mistakes. And so I try to explain down through this is why we have ask you to do this way. This is why we do ask you to do that. So that way, whenever we can catch it, we can understand where this cash was supposed to go, if there's any discrepancies and those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely walking people through the process is really, really helpful because it helps everybody manage the business, right? Ideally, you want everybody in your business to be invested in the success of the business and treating it, like like it's part of their business too. So
yeah, it's fascinating because there's the intricacies and the complexities of business operations is similar to the kind of overwhelming complexity of coffee when you first got into it. It's just like, wow, the little things make a big difference.
they do.
Okay, so the last question here is, when we take this example of these costing sheets, which again, thank you so much for that, by the way,
Yeah, of
it's
course.
really generous. And when people want to use that from this episode or just build their own, what are some pieces of wisdom that you could to impart to us to take the next steps appropriately for our business, and not just like maybe bite off more than we can chew, or apply it the right way? What are some things you think would be helpful?
I've found rhythms to be really helpful. Building in like a rhythmic calendar. Um, I I am not a type A type of person. I'm not super organized inherently. I have to make myself be organized, and I've just seen the number of times where like issues have come up because of my lack of organization. So really scheduling in time and relying on a schedule and a calendar and those sorts of organizational tools have been really helpful. It helps everybody. And so building in a rhythm around using the spreadsheets, around tracking your costs, around all of that is a really helpful thing in terms of managing your business. So you can start doing that with what your goal is, right? And you always want to like start with your goal first and then reverse engineer every step that it takes to get to that goal. So you just have to start thinking backwards from like getting to that goal and then working your way down and understanding what every single step is to be able to get there. And that can help you start with like avoiding that decision paralysis that sometimes happens, of feeling so overwhelmed like you just don't know where to start. Because if you kind of work backwards, it helps you understand precisely where you need to be, and what you should be starting with. So I find that to be really helpful.
Yeah, that does sound helpful. And maybe people just like choose a tab on here and this download, and maybe just do one,
Yep,
see how
totally.
it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the big one is to start with the ingredient costs first, and then
hmm
go in and break down how many units you have in each thing. So that's a good
Lovely,
place to start with
lovely.
there.
Maxwell, always awesome to talk to you. Thank you so much for this and the example you set for the industry. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, everyone. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode. It was great to hear Maxwell talk about making this approachable, choosing one thing, and then really executing on it and getting to know the rhythm of that particular spreadsheet. Maybe it's cost of goods for you, and you need to do an audit of what you're actually spending on your current inventory. I know that's true for a lot of my clients that are currently working through things like that to figure out how they can increase the price of certain menu items. This is a lifeline for you because a lot of our decisions are based on whims more than information. And certainly there is some art to pricing and there's some art to running a business, but I think you cannot survive without data and the science behind it. And this is what spreadsheets allow you. They allow you proof of concept, and they allow you to see the real health of the business financially, which really is going to help you sleep at night, honestly. So let's take what Maxwell has offered, take a little bit of what's on that spreadsheet that you can download over at keystotheshop.com on this episode's show page, and customize it for your business and do the work to make it yours. As my caveat with templates and things like that is always, these are tools that you need to really work hard to make yours, and then they will work for you. But they don't work for you unless you make them yours. So I'm really grateful for Maxwell coming on the show again. Always great to have him, one of those people that I'm super glad we have in the industry. Thank you so much, Maxwell. And you can go find more information about Narrative Coffee by visiting their website, narrative.coffee. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about this episode or any other episode of Keys to the Shop, let me know. Send me an email, chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in consulting or coaching with me through Keys to the Shop Consulting, that's also where you can reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. And I want to mention to you that one of the places you can learn about these types of financial necessities in your coffee shop amongst all the other things like making coffee and managing people and all of the facets that are a part of a great coffee bar, is Coffee Fest. Coffee Fest trade shows are happening this year in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Seattle. Those are the remaining shows for 2022. It's a 30-year anniversary of Coffee Fest, which I think is one of our industry's, if not the industry's, number one trade show and event to go to if you want to be resourced and equipped for success as a specialty coffee retailer. Accessible, priced, or free lectures, trainings, workshops, the fellowship with like-minded coffee people, competitions like cold brew and latte art, the trade show floor with incredible vendors, and ultimately, this is just a melting pot of good ideas in coffee that you and your team really need to experience. Now, if you want to register yourself and your team, you can do so by visiting coffeefest.com and learn more about these upcoming shows, and use the code KEYS, KEYS, to save 50% on your registration cost when you sign yourself and your team up over at coffeefest.com. Again, the code is KEYS for 50% off your registration cost. Now, I'm going to be at all of these shows judging latte art. I'll be presenting lectures and workshops at all of these shows as well. In Chicago, I'm going to be presenting a short 30-minute presentation on cafe bar design principles. And then we're going to be doing a paid workshop the day before Coffee Fest actually starts. That's going to be about helping you design systems in your coffee bar. And then we're going to be doing a lecture about hiring staff, retaining staff, and the culture of your coffee bar as well. So if you went to coffeefest.com and you just looked up Chris DeFurio, you'll find a list of what I'm presenting. Go today to learn more information over at coffeefest.com. And with that is the end of our show today, everyone. I hope you really enjoyed it and that it was very practical and useful. Don't forget to download these spreadsheets that Maxwell has generously shared with us. Have an amazing day, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.